You are listening to the Novel Writing Podcast, episode 178. Grab a cup, cozy up, and let's get to writing. Today, I am chatting with author E.A. Winters, author of 9 books, including the Blood and Flame Saga and the Melder Blood Chronicles. Tonight, we're going to talk about outlining and how a strong outline can help create clean first drafts. And that means it doesn't have to go through as many structural or developmental rewrites. Clean drafts will still need copy editing and proofreading, but in the world of indie publishing, we want to reduce how much we go through developmental edits, and EA seems to have figured out
Yes.
the secret sauce and how to have clean first drafts. So, EA, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
I just want to jump in and start off with, how long have you been writing?
So I started writing novels. Like, I've done some academic kind of stuff. I have a master's in an academic sort of field. But I've been writing these since 2017. But it took me 2 years to write my first novel. It was a year to write and another year to edit. I haven't been writing like with a smooth process until 1920.
So when
like
you wrote
2019
your first...
to 2020.
Oh, okay, 19.
Not
Yes.
my age. I was older than that.
I appreciate that you pointed that, because there are plenty of teenage authors, and yes, 19 to 20 is
very true.
2019 to
I'm not one of
2020.
them, but absolutely there are, and they're fabulous.
Exactly, yes. So your very, very first draft, like the first draft of your first book, what
Yes.
did that look like? Structure-wise, like how happy you were with it compared to your latest, most recent book that you've written, the first draft of that one?
So it's funny because I like to give a little caveat, because in an instance like this where I'm talking to authors, I'll be forthright and say I know it's got some pacing issues. I know it's got some lags in it, a couple spaces. I'm aware of, some of the things that are in it and probably why they're there. At the same time, I also try to be very careful about talking down on a book that I've written that I know there's a problem with, structural issue with readers, because I have done that. I did it once, actually. The first time that it happened, I told myself, don't ever do that again. It was an acquaintance. It was a friend of mine, actually, who had read the book. And because it was just with friends, I was just kind of, talking filterless. At the same time, she had read the book and loved it. And her son had read it like 11 times or something, which is really cool. But she had loved it. And I was talking down at something that she loved. And I didn't catch it until I kind of saw her face, and I was like, oh no. And that was just not a feeling I ever wanted to replicate, ever. I don't want to talk down at something that somebody loves. So just a note, when you feel insecure about something that you've written, because you know that there's something in the structure that, or whatever, at least for me, that was a lesson in watch your mouth, be careful, because people love some of the stuff that you've written, even if you think it's kind of like looking at yourself in the mirror, right? Like there's always going to be something you see. And some of them are evident. I do think that it shows that it won't be as popular of a book because there are some pacing issues. And it's mentioned a couple times. I think in reviews it's come up a couple times that it got a little slow in a couple spots. So I'm aware of it, but most people who read it do enjoy it. Honestly, I don't even super remember. Maybe I blacked it out. The actual state of my rough first draft. I know that I had to go through descriptions and fix those, and I clearly didn't fix all the pacing things because some of them are still in there. I did go through and eventually get a dev edit on it. I wasn't pleased with the editor that I ended up getting for it. So I ended up, paying to get it fixed up more than I have paid any of the other ones. And there's still a couple things that I think should be fixed. So, but I'm going to spend that time writing more books that are better books from the beginning, because I guess in my head, it's, if you're a carpenter and you make tables, I don't want to spend 10 years making one table, because that table, no matter how good I get and then go back to it, that table is still somewhere going to have the marks of a beginner on it. It just will. Even if it's not that bad of a table, it could be a decent table. It could be a pretty table. It could be an enjoyable table, it still has some marks of the beginner in that table just by the nature of what it is, right? Or you could, instead of doing, those 10 years on this perfect table that literally it's not possible that you can make that one perfect. Even if it's great, you could just make 10 more tables or 20 or 30 in that time. And all of those will end up being better than that first one that you started with. So if you're a writer, do you write books, or do you want to write a book in your life? And the best advice that I heard early on, I think, was that writing more books is the best way to get better. And so I decided earlier on in my process, when I was figuring out what that was between drafts to read a craft book or two and then, binge read for fun books if I haven't been able to cram them in while I write, because it's sort of hard for me to read because then I'll get excited and then I'll read and then I won't write. So sometimes I just binge for fun books between drafts. Audiobooks has helped some, but I haven't gotten the premium subscription, so I run out of books that I can read. So anyways, all that to say, it was definitely a significant difference. And if I were to go back and read one for fun, I think that one is the one I would be most afraid to reread. Even though I think that there are things in that book, funnily enough, creative world building things that are cooler than some of the other things I've done. I think there's a particular group called the Nazir that are really interesting. And I don't remember thinking them up. I don't remember how that, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But that was really cool. And there's, to some extent, I think it's like more interesting and creative than some of the other elements that I've had. So there's things in it that are really fresh idea and world building wise that I think are cool, that I'm proud of. And so I'm proud of the story. And there's things about that story that are really personal to me. I have several people in that book that are based off of real people that I know, which is more unique to that book, like 6 of them. And my husband, I have somebody based off of him. And I sort of actually did like a fantasy version of our meet cute in a scene in the book. So that's kind of fun. So there's a lot of things in that one that make it like very personal to me. That's like kind of warm fuzzy. So there's things about it that hold a special place in my heart. But I would say that it definitely has a couple areas. It's a quest. And I didn't spend 3 paragraphs writing about trees. I definitely did not do that. There are a few things though that I'm aware that, okay, here and probably over here, it's just slower. And I'm aware of it. And I would say that the internal reflection probably gets a little either too advanced too early or just a little too much. Sometimes. Some people loved it. I think I could have pulled it back a little, but it's been a while now since I've looked at it, to be honest with you, because I haven't wanted to look at it.
I'm kind of the same with my very, very first draft of my first book. It was 105,000 words. And
Yep.
I had no idea what I was doing when I sent it to my editor, because like that was my first experience with editing
Yeah.
and things like that. And it was like, oh, there's so much info dumping. There's
Mm-hmm.
that was my biggest problem, was info
Yes.
dumping, especially on
The
the first
amount
one.
of times I looked at that first chapter and still found things after I published it on the first page, I was like, oh my gosh. So that's just, of course, of course. But you learn what you learn when you learn it. And that was another thing, just the editing process was, yes, I edited it, my own or whatever. I had a friend, she's a lovely individual. I will not name her, but she's lovely, and I think she's, a fantastic person. She was in Queens going to grad school for editing, so she did it for free for experience, and I think I got what I paid for. It wasn't great. She ended up with a list. It took, she had such like passion for the project, which was so sweet. And she volunteered so much of her time to do this. And at the end, she had a list of words that she thought were too advanced, like that people wouldn't know what they were. And they were like minced meat pie, or like mantle, like instead of, like a shelf kind of mantle over a fireplace.
Yep,
And
that's
I
a
was
mantle.
like, you're grad school for this? And this vocabulary, not acceptable for adult audiences. I just, it was frustrating,
Yeah.
to say the least. But I didn't have any money, so like, I didn't originally pay anyone, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and then I got the cover for $250. It was professional, um, but it came up with humanities textbooks, so the title wasn't great. And the cover was professional, but not special. Um, there it is. And so eventually, when I had a little bit more business money, I gave it the edit it should have had. I added an extra scene or two, went through and smoothed it out a bit, and then updated the title and cover and relaunched it. So when I relaunched it as my debut, it is still my debut, but I was editing that one in between finishing writing book 4 of my other series. So I was writing my 5th book when I ended up going back to it. And I still think that there's a couple pacing things in it. So that should tell you something as well, that I was writing my 5th novel and I went back to work with this editor that I wasn't super impressed with, the other one that I had, not the one that I've done most of my stuff with. And she was a lot more expensive, but wasn't as good. And so anyway, yeah, I don't know if I answered that fully, but
Well, I mean, I think it's interesting though that even as we get to our fifth, nth, whatever book in the future,
Hmm.
there's
Hmm.
still going to be things that we're not going to catch. And that means that like the book that you write, even if it goes through multiple edits and you perfect it as much as you can, it's still not going to be perfect.
Yes.
And I can go back to my first book and I can clearly see all the places where I messed up, where I
Oh,
should have fixed
sure.
things or changed things. And like, I
Hmm.
mean, I would love to, but it's published. And I don't
Right.
want to go
Yep.
back and
Go back.
do that. Yeah, because
No.
that's like
Yes.
it's the introduction to the series. It's like that
Hmm.
is the very first thing that I put out into the world. I'm like, I don't want to go and change it.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's funny because um every so often I'll have somebody who really enjoyed The Forgotten Stone, that's the debut one, say, you opened it up for like a sequel. I would love to, like, are you going to do a sequel? The answer is no. I'm never doing a sequel. Never, never. I have some cool ideas of what I would do for what I had in mind for doing a book two if I did a book two. I have the title. I'm never going to write it unless, like, I mean, never say never, but like, I can't describe to you what would have to be given to me for me to go back and write it. The reason is I do think it's a good story. I'm not that writer though. It wouldn't feel continuous, you know? I really don't think so because my style is different now. I don't like it when people read that one first. I think if they read my other stuff and then they go back and enjoy it, great. But then if they've read my other stuff and they go back and they don't enjoy it, that's a fluke. That's something that's different from my other books. So if they enjoy it, it's gravy. I think that's awesome. If they read it and it's just not their favorite, they'll just go back and read all of my other 8 books, and those are more on par, with where I am now. So, and it's also kind of funny because when I wrote Mildred Blood, it takes a secondary character from Blood and Flame and gives her her own, thing. And the fact that it was connected was very, very helpful because I thought, honestly, that selling Mildred Blood would be easier than selling Dragon's Kiss based on the pitch. I thought that it was better fit for book talk in particular, and just the marketing. I thought it would be better suited to it. We were talking about the secondary characters, and it's funny because Dragon's Kiss, which is right here, the Dragons and Assassins, book one. Um, that's the second book I wrote, and that's actually people really enjoy it. But it's funny because I thought that Mildred Blood, I had tried to write them so that you could dive in at either one and then go to the other. But Dragon's Kiss does chronologically happen first, so most people read that first. And what my assistant and I have realized is I really thought that Mildred Blood would be a good entry point. I was wrong about that. It's hard to sell Mildred Blood on its own for some reason. It's okay, but for some reason, the best way to sell Mildred Blood is to sell Dragon's Kiss, and they'll read through it, and then they'll go on to Mildred Blood because they know they enjoy my writing or my style or whatever. So really, just leaning into selling that book one, I can sell that one, and I might sell 8 books, which is crazy. The only bummer about it is when I was practicing this. Dragon's Kiss was the book where I was really practicing my outlining process for the first time, figuring out that because I didn't do that at all for the debut, which is why it has the pacing issues, at least for me. And so I wrap up Dragon's Kiss too well. You could read that book and enjoy it and then just read something else. And if you go, oh, I liked that, then you'd read in, right? So, like, my read through from book one to book two isn't as strong as once you get book two, it's pretty strong. But if I had known then that book one would sell 8 better than selling the other book one, like I probably would have tried to figure out more about. I don't know. I did the best with what I knew, right? But I wrapped it up a little too much.
So, what does your outlining process look like now that you've figured out the
Mhm.
pacing thing that you need to have strong outlines and you've written eight
Yes.
books?
All right. So I've got a couple different things. So be advised that I've done a few, and even now, like I have a pretty set process, but I pull from a couple different things depending on the book, if that makes sense. So the book I'm calling Double M, which I haven't released the title for, that one includes a murder mystery in it. It's a fantasy, lit RPG kind of fantasy, which I've never done before. And I've also never done a murder mystery inside of one of these. And those are very particular. and they have some different beats than the beats that I usually do, because I usually layer things like myth, action, romance, and those are the base ones. And if you can stack, genres around a central one, that's the best way to go. I used the first craft book I did, I've got it with me, was My Story Can Beat Up Your Story. I love it. It's by Jeffrey Schechter. He is a Hollywood screenwriter, so he talks a lot about film, but the arc of story is the same. And so one of the reasons why Dragon's Kiss wraps up so well is I used this to practice developing my Dragon's Kiss, to see how it was going, and kind of experiment and feel out this new, style, to figure out what do I even do for outlining. And I followed it real close to see how it went, but it didn't tell me about a series. So I just kind of wrapped it. Now I know what I want to do. And so now that once I had done that, I was like, oh, I need to do this a little differently, because I want to sell more than one book. I want people to enjoy it for longer, you know? So, so now I have a few different things I do. One is he's got a very specific outline, very specific. And I frequently still use his outline. Actually, the one that I'm using right now for my current book is mostly that one. There's another one by John Truby. It is kind of expensive. He has a Blockbuster Software. The logo is BB and it looks like a film strip sort of, and he basically sells like beats of the genre and where they should hit. So there's an overarching, every story has this flow, and then the romance beats hit at this point of the story, right? So like for a mystery, maybe clue 1, and then this other thing, clue 2, and then towards the end you get like a couple close together. But if you layer that on top of like the romance one, they have like the joust or like the second love interest coming in, and the dance and the breakup and the reunification kind of thing also happens at certain parts of the story. They has to happen around the same time frame. And when you layer them on top of the other ones, you actually see which items should happen close together for each of the different ones to occur at once. And if you can get them to happen not only close together, but in the same moment, that's even better. If that makes sense. If you can make one thing serve 2 or 3 of the beats that need to happen close together, that's really cool. So I will say sometimes, now that I've gotten a feel for what the beats are, I feel like I bought the one for mystery to see, and it helped a little. It felt expensive for what it was, because it had some other capacities in it that I don't really use. I really just use where the beats are and reminding me what they're supposed to be. So this one has it's a like the BB plot formula. John Truby has like a 22-step anatomy of story type deal. This one I had layered action, romance, and crime, because the one that I'm doing now has a heist,
I
fantasy
think I
heist.
have Anatomy of Genre on my shelf somewhere.
Okay, yeah. So it's that broken specifically into the beats for each individual genre,
Cool.
and
Okay.
then so it's the same thing broken more specifically. So they have, overture, and then cycle of fear, inability to love, the gaze meeting, life desire, joust, second suitor, first dance. That's all like the romance track. And then you also have at the same time the where is it? The action has the, hero's nemesis, you're collecting allies, there's training, there's a game plan, there's a hierarchy of different opponents, cat and mouse kind of deal. And then we have the crime one layered on top. And so now I would say, okay, hero's nemesis, joust, and this super criminal, like the names of these beats happen at actually the same time. So if you can have them happen either very close together or at the same time, that's the best way to go. For this story, I ended up using mostly My Story Can Beat Up Your Story. For the last one, I used a lot of Truby's. So I kind of pull, I guess, from a couple different ones depending on the story. But I still really like the bones of the My Story Can Beat Up Your Story. He's got a great sense of pacing and structure. I've really enjoyed that a lot. I'm not as hammered specific as I would have been to begin with. I'm willing to play with it, like as you would say, once you know the rules, you can break them. But there's the overall sweeping rules you really don't want to break, because there's a reason they're there. So, the idea of, I like how he describes having yes, no reversals. where there's different setups and stuff, but once you hit a certain part of the story, you do yes, no, yes, no. And he talks a lot about the 4, 5, 6 original Star Wars books or movies. He uses that a lot, references that a lot in the book. So bonus points to you if you read it and you've seen it. But he talks about, they start as low yes nos with like a yes, Luke agrees to go with Obi-Wan to learn stuff. But no, they're stopped by stormtroopers. But yes, he uses mind tricks and they go away. And that's pretty low stakes, right? But then you do a couple more yes nos and now they're in the trash compactor. That's a pretty higher stakes kind of thing, right? But no, it's squeezing in. But yes, they stopped it. But no, there's stuff in the water, right? And so you see it escalating. The yes nos get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then at the end, instead of doing yes, no, oh rats, now I don't want to say it wrong. I'm making myself nervous for no reason. There's a yes, a no, a big no, and then a final yes. And you know that because when you watch any movie ever or any book, readers will joke about like when things look good but there's 100 pages left, and like
Yep.
bad crap is about to hit the fan.
Yep.
So it's so true. We just know it. Like it's just like in our bones that something's gonna happen. Like you watch a movie with somebody, they're like, oh no, I just feel it. Like something's coming. It's like, yeah, because every good story does this. So that's why you know it's coming. And that's also why it has to come. Like it has to come. You have to give that. So when you do the yes, no's at the end, when you get to that part, the climax, that's when you hit yes, like a big feeling yes, but then a no, and then crash it with another bigger no, and then you have your final yes swooping in.
Okay. I hadn't heard that story structure before, but I also haven't read that many structured books. I have Save the Cat Writes a Novel. That's the one
Yep.
that I'm leaning on the most for going forward. But I also have
Mm-hmm.
K.M. Weiland's structure books, and it's like I haven't taken the time to actually dig in deep to those craft books,
Yeah.
which is why I really
Mm-hmm.
love your suggestion of reading at least one in between books or in between drafts, because that really
Yeah.
does help.
I really like it. And the other thing too is there's so much, unless you're overhauling a new system, which if you're going to use his, I would really recommend if you can at all to use it when your story idea is still a baby story idea
Oh,
so that you
perfect. I'll
can
use
let
it for
it
my next
like,
series.
oh good, seriously do it because it'll let it like play out. He has a whole thing for like how to add side characters and everything. And so I don't always do that all the way, although I think it would behoove me to do it more fully for each one. Some of it is more intuitive now that I've soaked it up, and some of it I could spend more time on and probably should, but don't always do all the way.
It
And
seems like
sometimes
it
my
would be
cast just
best.
isn't large.
That's true. But it seems like it would be best to like stick with one specific type of structure for a series instead of jumping around between a bunch of them, right?
Could be, although at the same time, I think often I don't think it's necessary to read 5 books on craft or excuse me, on structure. Don't limit yourself on learning craft, but on structure because once you read several, you'll see that they just call them different stuff.
That's true.
A lot of the things are the same. I really like how he phrases things. He's funny. It's light. It's not super long. There's graphs and pictures. There's columns. It's delightful. I've really liked that. Which the part of me that loves that is probably the part of me that desperately needed an outline. And that was the thing is that, being a pantser or discovery writer, when I talk to discovery writers that identify as discovery writers, they often talk about how there's not discovery in outlining. I don't feel that way at all. I just feel that my discovery is interspersed at different aspects of the process than theirs is. But we both have the same amount of discovery because we both end up with the same amount of story that all came straight out of our head, right? So you had to discover that somewhere. It's just
That's
at what
true.
point of the process you do that discovering. So for me, it's very exciting to put together parts of the outline because I'm figuring out what's going to happen. And yet there's things about it where I know this is going to happen. He's going to get away here. They're going to get chased here, and sometimes if I really have a picture in my head of what's going on, I'll write a little snippet in the outline of like a dialogue exchange because I really have a sense for it. And that's great because when I'm writing, I'm like, I did an extra 400 words today, but I didn't. It was just copy pasted from the outline, but I feel good about it, makes
I
me
do
feel
that too.
awesome. It's like the most fun ever. So there's definitely that. Um, but I do my discovery that way. And then also I do my discovery when I know what I'm going to write and I'm excited what's going to happen in that chapter because I've already written the outline. And at the same time, I get to actually bring it to life. And so all the extra details are there now. And there's things that I didn't have it painted, right? It was like a sketch. And now I'm painting it and bringing it full color. And there's small little details that I'm discovering along the way that I didn't know before. I didn't know what the ballroom looked like. I just knew that there was one, right? And there might be small details there that I go, ooh, like in this last book, I actually had the one I'm writing now in the last week or two, there was something where it was like he needs to steal something. And later that thing can pop up. But I didn't really care what the thing was. He just needed to steal something for this effect. But then 3 chapters later, I'm like, oh, we need a thing. But if he stole that 3 chapters ago, then look at that. We already have it. So I just like went back and made it that thing. And that took me 4 seconds, and then somebody was probably like, wow, look at that. She was thinking of it the whole time. And I was like, well,
That's what we want you to think.
Right. So anyways, so to me, it is very discovery, but the problem is for it, I know, knowing my own self and my personality, why did I think to myself, this fits your personality? I make Excel sheets for things way too often for me to think that just floating along was my vibe, There's nothing wrong with that vibe. I think that's fabulous. When I was first writing it, that was part of my problem, is I didn't realize what was best for me. And I thought, I'm like Stephen King and Lord of the Rings, like, and there was an and, I'm not conflating the two. That, Stephen King is a discovery writer or pantser. Lord of the Rings, Tolkien said, I didn't know what these places looked like until I walked in them. And I was like, yeah, like that's me. Like that's what's going on.
But I mean,
And
Tolkien also he created the entire Elven language before he wrote any of the books.
he
So
did. He did. But that doesn't mean that, so he knew the language and he
right,
almost
I'm
wrote the
saying
book like for the language.
right, that's exactly it, right?
Yeah.
He wrote the language before he wrote the book that the language would become part of.
It's so
It's
true.
wild.
Yeah. It's so true. It is pretty wild. He's just something, man. I just really thought that was me, but it's not. That's not my style. And I didn't know it at the time. And so I learned on my first book that I despise the edits so deeply. So deeply I hate it. Also because there were some pacing issues with it. I was editing stuff that I didn't love, you know? I wasn't just doing little fixes. I was like, ugh, like, ugh, when am I gonna do the fun stuff? When can I like make stuff happen? Like new things. I already know what happens in this chapter. I don't want to go back and look at it. I've already been there. I've already visited that place. Let's go somewhere new. Let's do something exciting. Do they think they're gonna die yet? Because if it's been more than a few seconds and they feel safe, then what am I doing?
You
What
would
am I
cry at
doing?
my process. My book 3 right now is taken 2 years, over 2 years.
Oh man. Yeah, see that like burns my soul inside. And that doesn't mean that it's the wrong thing to do necessarily. It's just that for me, it would kill me. It would just kill me. So for me, I need to like keep doing new things and try stuff out. And so I try, even when I look at craft books in between, I try to only focus on one or two main takeaways that I want to apply at the next book so that I'm not overwhelmed and try to do everything, because then I could do a crap job at doing 10 new things. I would rather do a good job at doing 2 new things and apply that to my next draft. And actually, one of those things that I don't know that anyone would actually pick out and notice unless they were really looking for it, but in Blood and Flame, I think it was either towards the end of Noble Claims, which is book 3, or when I started book 4 of that series, I stopped using dialogue tags completely. I know.
What?
I know. It was, and I knew when it was because I think it was the first time I went to 20 Books conference and I listened to a session and I was like, what are you talking about? Shenanigans. And then he gave examples and stuff. And I was like, by golly, action cat tags can do it all. They reign supreme for sure. So that is what I use now almost exclusively. I used 2 dialogue tags today and I almost died because I haven't done it for forever. The only other times that I've done it since then, in the last like 4 books that I've written, have been when they were in a dark cave and literally couldn't see who was talking. And so by what they were doing. And so I had to use them. So I really do. Now it's literally, and it forces me to think better about the scene. I have to picture it more completely. I have to imagine what they're doing, and it makes it more dynamic because instead of saying like they retorted it, you know, they're holding papers that they were looking at. Now they don't retort it. They throw the papers on the desk. And then they say a thing. And that is far more of a picture in your mind than they retorted. Okay, he was mad. We get it. Okay, but was he mad? Like, what does it look like? What is that mad? How does that come out? How do we see that? Right?
You are making me
Because what
want
are
to
the
use only action tags
things?
for my prequel.
Come over to this side. Seriously, you should so do it. It's
I haven't started writing my prequel, so this is the perfect opportunity.
You should do it. It's
I'm in the middle
perfect.
of
It's
outlining.
perfect. Oh my gosh. This is perfect timing.
I
You should
know.
literally do it. It is crazy. It is crazy. When I first heard him say that, I couldn't imagine that it was actually true, that you really wouldn't need any. You don't need any.
That is amazing.
You don't need a single solitary
That
dialogue
that
tag.
adds new meaning to the phrase "said is dead."
Yes, I know. Because now it's so funny when I hear people saying like, "Oh, if you should use said a lot, or if you should use, responded or answered," and that's what you heard, all through school. You were told you should vary it up because it's boring, and then you learned that it was actually supposed to be invisible. It's like, heck with that. You can just take it all the way out.
So, since you talked about your I don't know hatred for the discovery part of it, or not necessarily
The editing side.
the editing side, you're right, right. So,
Yes.
since we I mean, all writers will do discovery, whether it's in the outlining phase or during the writing phase.
Yeah.
But how much do you find that once you have an outline done, do you like flex around
Play with it.
inside it once you start writing?
Right. I usually flex a little at different places. Sometimes I actually change the outline to reflect it so that it's easier for me if I go back and look at things that happen in it in the outline so that I don't have to look through the actual manuscript. Sometimes I don't bother if it's a small enough change or if I'm lazy when I should. I do sometimes change things, but they're not usually sweeping changes. There was one instance though in Reaverbane actually in book 4 of the Mildred Blood Chronicles where I was partway through and I had done the normal outline process. I liked the outline when I wrote it. It was normal from what I'd done, the last several books. And I had the time to write and I sat down to write and I didn't want to write. Like, I wanted to write, but I didn't want to write. And I just was hitting my head on a wall. I was like, what is going on? Like, what is the deal here? And I was so frustrated. Finally, I figured it out. I hated my outline. It was broken. There was something in it that I didn't like that I knew didn't work, and I didn't want to write it because the outline sucked. And I liked it when I wrote it, and it technically followed, certain things, but there was stuff in it that it didn't work. And I could feel that it didn't work, but I hadn't put my finger on it. And so it stunk because I felt like I was wasting so much time being not productive, and then I'm going to have to waste more time after not being productive by not writing in order to fix the outline before I kept going. So I knew where the heck I was headed, right? And I was really frustrated about it, but I ended up taking a day and it was so significant of an overhaul. I didn't have to change what I had so much, but I had to change what was going forward. I think I removed a little bit, but not much. So you back up to where it was exciting, back up to what you liked, and then rip it apart. And so I did actually go through and create an outline of what I actually had on paper, what was actually in the manuscript, a new one, right? It mostly reflected the old one because it's certain things, but like the main strokes of what now is the biggest meat of the story. And I rewrote the outline from there of what I actually had, and then looked at that and created the rest of the story. And there were things that I just chopped, kill your darlings, just kill them all.
Well, I
And
mean, at that point,
and
they're not really your darlings if you hated the outline.
not anymore. Right. And so it really stunk. There were a couple scenes that I was like, "Oh," but not worth it. It was not worth it. Like I took the whole day and just that's what I did the whole day. And ultimately, it's a much better book with much better pacing now. And one part gets and I mean there's several things that get, intense, but it might feel like you're closer to the end than you are because I thought I was, and then I wasn't. I thought I was so close. So it was like really building and then didn't end.
Whoopsie.
um But it turned out okay. And that was one of the problems, is that I had built up all this momentum, but so much still had to happen before the end in the outline. And then they had to travel somewhere, and travel kills your pacing. So you had
Ugh.
all of this, like, emotion was high, right? You had it was ready for a climax, but for the climax to hit how I wanted, they couldn't be there. They had to be at that other place. And to get there would have just destroyed what I had built. So I had to find a better way to maintain the things I liked about what I had built and travel there without losing all of that, and keep us engaged and keep that emotion where I wanted for that push pull, to build up that tension, afresh for the actual climax of the story at the end.
Having to kill your outline to fix it, I feel like if you have a really good idea of the start to the finish of the story, the outline is
Mm-hmm.
going to be easier. But if you
Yes.
don't know how you want the story to go, you're going to end up
Mm-hmm.
spending more time on that outline if you want to have the outline good before you start writing, right? So for you,
Could be.
since you have such quick drafts from first draft to published, you're what, how many months? Like 3, 4 months?
Yes. Pre-dictation, I was at roughly 4 months when my kids were in school, and now
Okay.
I'm at well, this is my first true full-length novel project that I'm dictating, but I think it'll be closer to 2 months, and I would be at, yeah, so 2 to 4.
So with that, since the writing itself is so compressed, how long
Hmm.
does it take you to go start to finish on an outline that you feel happy with?
It's kind of hard to say, because sometimes it flows real good and I could do it in a day. Sometimes it's like a week. And then the last one that I had, the double M story that I mentioned, honestly, I think that's the best thing I've ever written. I like what I'm writing now. I think that's the best thing I've ever written. And so I'm really excited to see what happens with it. But that one took me a lot longer because it was a different kind of story than I normally would write, right? Because it has the lit RPG elements in it, and there's just different things about it that I took real care with. And I pour myself into all my stories, but there's something about that one that, yeah, I just really am proud of, which is kind of fun. That one took me quite a while to do the outline. I don't want to say it was a month. And it's hard to say too, because sometimes it's kind of conflated with what the heck I'm doing in my life. This year, the number of snow days and sick days we have had has just, I mean, I am so behind right now because I scheduled my editor, because I didn't technically have a deadline. I'm like, it's like a first in a new series, so I don't even have to have it technically super tight. I just know I need to get something out soon because it's been a while since I've released, and that feels weird and I don't like it. And so I needed to get something out. And I wrote that other book that I haven't like released, so that creates obviously this lag time that I don't love. Outlines. Yeah, it takes me, I mean, if they're short, if I'm really in a flow, like usually if I'm mid-series and I'm not building a world from scratch, you know what I mean? And I already know the
Okay, yeah.
characters and I already have an idea. Because then when I'm writing book one, I already have ideas of where I'm going for book two. I might not have a full one outlined. Actually, for Blood and Flame, I think I ended up outlining the whole series. Like I wrote book one, and then I think I outlined two, three, four together, so I knew exactly where I was headed for each one, and I could drop in my Easter eggs as I go, and I don't have to go back and mess with anything. And it's just there, and it's ready. And then if anything changes, well, like it's probably smaller changes, and I can tweak as I go. Then I didn't do that for Melted Blood. I did one at a time, but I would have like a running list of notes for ideas for what needed to happen in the next one in series, so that I wouldn't lose that. So I do have sort of ways to keep that continuous.
Part of me wishes that I had outlined my whole series when I wrote the first book, but I had no idea what I was doing. And I also have things
Yeah,
that happening in book three that were not even on my radar back when I was writing book
right.
one. And so
Yes.
I kind of like the longer process, at least on my end, even though I
Mm-hmm.
mean I like it, but I don't like it because it's
Mm-hmm.
allowing me this creativity to get more interesting things into it with the
Yeah.
collaboration with my editor. But at the same time, like I want to release faster, I want to write more. And yeah, it's just
Mm-hmm.
this weird dichotomy of desires there.
I think it really does depend though, because I I like sharing my process because I found something that works for me, but that's exactly it. I found something that works for me. And so the problem with me trying to pants my first novel was that I didn't know what my process was, and I was taking a stab in the dark. For someone who may have started outlining, found out that that was not their vibe, and then that was their stab in the dark because everyone told them that's what you're supposed to do, and then they start to pants, right? Perfect. It just is what fits your brain, what fits your personality. And actually, I love this. The idea of, I learned this from, I watched some videos from Mary Robinette, who writes short stories and who Brandon Sanderson knows, because I watched some of his BYU lectures, when I was getting started as well, which is very, very helpful. And she described this idea of flying by the seat of your pants, and that you fly by the seat of your pants because you're the pilot and you know the plane so well that you can afford to fly by feel. So it's
That's
not
not
because
me.
you're, well, but that's the difference, right? Is that this idea
Yeah,
of, so like in the My Story Can Be a Pure Story outlining slash, process book, he talks about story structure, different elements of it. And one of the parts that I really like is he basically takes a 3-act structure and breaks it into 4. So your act 2 splits into part 1, part 2 of that. So you have these phases across every genre. From Disney, you'll see it everywhere now, like from Disney to horror to fantasy to whatever. All age audiences, literally all of them. You have orphan, wanderer, warrior, martyr. That's how the arc goes. And so, like orphan, at the beginning of the story, you have either an actual literal orphan or emotional distance from a parent. So Harry Potter, literal orphan, and emotional distance from the caretakers he does have. Luke Skywalker, he's he thinks he's a literal orphan, and I mean his mom is dead. He doesn't know the dad thing, obviously, but he has good positive caretakers at the beginning of Act 1, but he's not by the end of Act 1. So if he's not an orphan or an emotional orphan by the beginning of the book, he will be by the end of Act 1. And that's what happens. His aunt and uncle, who are loving, wonderful caregivers, are murdered, right? And then he suddenly is motivated and willing and ready to embark in this adventure to figure out how to stop what's happening, right? Little Mermaid, very small children. It's for them, right? We have mom is gone, so we're halfway to orphan, and we've got emotional distance with dad. Jasmine, emotional distance with dad. Where's mom? We don't know, right? So you literally, every genre, everything, you just see it, and you will never not see it. And he talks about elements of this structure, and it's so funny. Like I really enjoyed it because he literally goes, every top 100 story has this, like the ones that actually do well. Not every story has it, but some stories suck. It's basically what he said. And he said every story that's doing, in the top, has made a top 100, has it like this. And if you think that you have an example that's not the case, that meets these criteria, send an email to this email and I will owe you $1. But if I can show you that you're wrong, you will owe me $1. And then at the end of the chapter, he goes, it's a sucker bet. Don't take it. You're going to lose $1. You just won't find one.
I need to buy this book.
Um, I'm telling you, it's hilarious. It was a great intro, but it's more than an intro. It's great. I really like it. And the more stuck I am, the more I go back and really like delve into it more deeply. If I'm not stuck, I use it for broad bones. But I really like how he describes it. I really do. It's fun.
What advice would you give for people who want to learn how to develop their own outlining process?
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, I'm 3 books in. I'm in the middle of
Yeah.
outlining my prequel.
Fantastic.
But I'm trying to get the outline super, super clean so that I don't have to, like for the
Mm-hmm.
prequel in particular, I don't plan to go through developmental editing because it's just
Yeah.
for book funnel audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I
Great.
don't want to spend money on the developmental edit for that. So for
Yes.
people, not necessarily maybe, well, for both people like me and for people who are starting from scratch, what is the best
Mm-hmm.
way to start to hone your own outlining process so that you don't have to
Yeah.
spend so much time in those rewrites?
I mean, I think you do have to play a little, to see what was it about the last book process that you liked? What part did you absolutely hate? And how can you even it out so that you don't have to do as much of what you hate? One of the things, this is a theory that I don't know completely pans out, to be honest, but I have this sort of general theory that maybe by and large or broad strokes, that if you like the editing part, you tend to pants more. And if you hate the editing, you prefer the outlining. I don't know if that's true. And I have already met some people that kind of breaks it down. But I wonder if like broad strokes that's somewhat true. Where if you're like, oh, just make bad art, chuck words on the page, and you can go back and fix it later. And that's exciting because then it becomes beautiful and it really brings it to life there. That's what I feel like I'm doing when I take my outline and I make it beautiful and out, right? And so for me, I might tinker a little as I go so that by the time I'm done with the draft, it's a rough draft, but it's pretty clean. I don't really do anything with it. I mean, I don't know that see, that's another weird thing. You don't, it's really kind of taboo to tell authors not to do more edits of their stuff. So I can't prescribe it, but that is what I do. I would just rather write another book. I want the books that I write to be good, obviously, and I want to make each one better than the last. So I want to be careful that the process I have is as excellent as it can be. I don't want to get into a phase where I start fiddling so much. There's a part where you're fiddling and there's a part where you're over fiddling. Like you can make it better, and then there becomes a point where you might get lost in the weeds, and instead of making it better, you're just moving stuff around now. It was fine before. So you got to figure out where that line is, and if you're not sure where it is, you might need a break. You might need to go work on another project, come back and look at it, or just write another thing. I'm a big proponent of that. Mostly hearing it first from Craig Martell, and then from several other people. If you don't know him, he originally was one of the two people who started 20 Books to 50K. He now does Successful Indie Author, and he's phenomenal. He made $7 million in 7 years indie exclusive. So, I mean, he's fabulous. I did a capstone with him in Alaska twice as well, where he only has like 25 people in Fairbanks, and it was great. Yeah, so I mean, I think it takes some playing. Like, for me, reading that book was good, and then I used Plotter for a while to like move things around. Now I don't use Plotter so much. So you just kind of like you have to play with it a little. There's a little bit of throwing spaghetti at the wall. But even so, you're not throwing anything at the wall. You're not throwing mashed potatoes. You're not throwing bouncy balls. You're throwing spaghetti. Like you've still got a category. You know what I mean? And of those where there's a chance it might stick, be strategic about what you chuck, but go ahead and start chucking some stuff, right? Like, all right, so we like, this part of my process, that didn't go very well. Or I really liked that part of it, but something about it wasn't quite. So like, what can you play with? Or can you change how often, like how much you look at it, or when you back away or whatever? And I've also done that to iterate not only my process of actually getting the words down, but the time that I'm spending on work. So like I have a screen app to try to help me like not mindlessly open all my social media apps. And that has helped me, to be honest. For a while, I was leaving my phone outside my office because I had to drill into my head that this is not get distracted and scroll time. And I'm working. I'm in my house, and there are dishes and there is laundry, but I am working. And that's hard, I think, especially for moms. Or women who just tend to have, lots of things going on. I mean, guys can have that too, but women actually have physically in your brain, a larger corpus callosum that connects your two hemispheres. And there's a reason why we are mastered task switchers. And so men tend to, at least statistically, be very good or more adept at honing in on a task and being focused on that thing, which is phenomenal. It's a very good strength to have someone really focus in and do that thing, right? Which is why you can be like, did you not hear me talking to you? I've been over here talking. And he's like, what? And you're like, I've been talking to you for 5, you said words, but that box wasn't open. The box was closed. He was in another box. I don't know if you've heard this, that men are like waffles and women are like spaghetti. Phenomenal. So funny because it is a clean box. It's a clean little box, and you open up that box. Only the one. Don't open more boxes than one. And you close it and you put it away. You get a new box. Only one. Just pick one. We are spaghetti. Everything touches everything else, and I have to tell you the whole stuff at the beginning. And I'm going to tell you because it all touches, and I don't even know what I'm thinking until I say half of it. And so it's just very different, right? And so everyone's process is going to be different between that or whatever. So the more you know about your brain, the more you know about your personality, the better you can kind of figure out what actually works for you. And so for me, it's hard for me to be home when working because I'm spaghetti. If I see the thing in the sink, I'm bothered by it. It annoys me. And I'm supposed to be doing something else, right? So for a while, I worked at Starbucks. I worked, I went to Starbucks to write, and I worked at Chick-fil-A, but I've never worked at Starbucks. And then I accidentally got to know the regulars and like people who worked there. It's so sad. And then they would talk to me, and I would talk to them, and I wouldn't write, and I was spending too much money there. It was a problem. So literally this past November, this is so embarrassing. Literally this past November, I was talking to my writer friends at a conference in Vegas, and they were talking to me about this and this problem that I was having, that I was talking to people, and that they would talk to me as well. And they said, maybe you need bigger headphones. I was using AirPods, or like, I need one of those plaques, don't talk to me, I'm too social, or whatever. And the couple of friends in that circle that knew me better were like, what are you talking about? Have you met you? That's not going to work. And so I was like, okay, well, but I didn't want to go back into my office where the rest of my housework waited for me. But I just had to train it. It's trainable like anything else. So I was harsher with myself while I was building those brain connections, right? And I created a part of what I do now in my ritual is also I have a hot drink. I have chai tea in the morning and herbal tea later because I don't need the caffeine twice, and it's more expensive to get the concentrate that I like. And yeah, so that's part of what I do. And so you can iterate on the best way to process your actual writing session to make it the most productive time you can. Remove the phone, put your focus settings on, whatever you got to do. Clean up your space. Make sure that you don't see any of those things during that time. Listen to music you only listen to during writing time to tell your brain this is the time to write. You're not doing other stuff. You can do that sort of with your process where you sort of figure out, all right, well, like this is, how do I do that? And yeah, throw some things on the wall, see which things work. That's what I did with the Blockbuster software. It was new to me, but I thought layering these genres together makes so much sense. I'm already sort of doing it intuitively, but if I could do it a little bit closer, that'd be great. And so now I do use it, but I found I really like that my story can beat up your story generalities. But sometimes a story will demand a little bit more of a specific approach for those beats, and I'll want to make sure that I'm following that, if that makes any sense. So I kind of push and pull a little bit, but I've got the ones that are my favorites, and now it's sort of just like a growing toolbox instead of a super rigid thing. Does that make sense? I feel like I
Yeah.
rambled a little.
You did, but it was a great ramble. I loved it. I mean,
Okay.
I could talk to you for hours, but we don't have that long.
I am complimented. Thank you.
So, if people would like to reach out to you, talk to you more, buy your books because your books are fabulous,
Yeah.
where would be the best place
Thank
for
you.
them to do that?
So Amazon for buying books, Amazon is great. All the books are also in KU if you have that. And for signed books, you can only get those on my website at eawinters.com. So that's the only place you can actually get signed stuff. It's also the only places that you get my little like note cards of art that I don't have them listed to buy, but if you buy a book that has an art attached to it, I will often just check it in with the order. So things to know, things to know. As far as connecting with me, there are a couple different ways you can do that. You can find me on TikTok at eawinters.com. You can find me at Instagram, also EA, but it's e.a. because unfortunately it was different. I'm on Facebook as well, but I'm most active on TikTok and Instagram. And of course, I've got a contact on my website. But no, I do not publish anyone else's books at this time. I am indie. So I am focusing on my own work. So if that was your question, no, I get some of those.
Well, thank you for
No,
that clarification.
but I do like talking to people. Obviously, that's why it's a problem. But I do really love people.
Well, thank you for joining me on the podcast and for just letting us have this amazing conversation about outlining because it was very helpful for me.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. I'm so glad. It was such a pleasure. Thank you for having me on. It was great chatting with you last time, and I enjoyed it just as much today. So thank you, and I'm excited to hear how it goes for you. Which things work and what spaghetti you chuck.
Oh yeah. All right, everybody, that is it for today's episode. Thank you for joining us, and remember, the first draft is supposed to be garbage. Thanks for listening to the Novel Writing Podcast. If you're ready to stop struggling and start finishing your novel, Check out the 60-Day Novel Writing Challenge. It's a step-by-step program designed for solo writers to complete their first draft with clarity and focus. Visit the link in the description to learn more.